Zawadi had been planning the anniversary dinner for weeks. She picked the perfect setting at their beautiful estate in Nairobi, Kenya. She ordered their favorite food, lit candles, and even placed a small gift by his plate. She hoped this night would bring back the love they once shared. She wore the perfume he used to love, and her heart raced with both excitement and nervousness. But when Themba finally arrived, everything broke inside her. He walked in, not with flowers or an apology for being late, but with another woman, a younger woman, holding her hand like they were the couple being celebrated. Zawadi stood frozen. Themba smiled casually and said, "Meet Aking, my business partner." The words hung in the air, but his tone made it clear, this was not just business. Aking wore a tight dress, the same perfume Zawadi once wore, and she slid into Zawadi's seat like she belonged there. She laughed loudly, clinking her wine glass with Themba's, completely unaware or unbothered by the pain in Zawadi's eyes. Guests around the table shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension. But Zawadi didn't say a word. Not yet. She simply smiled, as if everything was fine. But behind that calm smile was a storm. She had been preparing something else too. Something that would change everything. This dinner wasn't going to end in tears for her. No, it would be a new beginning. And the man who once held her heart would soon hold nothing at all. Aking walked in holding Themba's hand like she had every right to be there. Her smile was wide, confident, almost proud. Zawadi stood still, her heart pounding, but her face calm. She watched silently as Aking walked straight to her seat. The chair at the head of the table, the one Zawadi had picked and decorated herself. It wasn't just any chair. That spot had meaning. It was where Zawadi had placed a small, wrapped gift for Themba. A beautiful watch, engraved with words from her heart. But Aking didn't even glance at it. She sat down in Zawadi's seat like she owned it, carelessly brushing the gift aside. Then came the next sting. Aking picked up Zawadi's wine glass, held it high, and laughed as she toasted with Themba. "To success and beautiful surprises," she said playfully. Themba smiled back and clinked his glass with hers like everything was perfect. And just like that, it hit Zawadi. Aking was wearing her perfume. The same scent Zawadi used to wear when she and Themba first fell in love. Jasmine and vanilla. A scent that once made him say she smelled like heaven. Now it was on the other woman. Everyone at the table felt the tension. The guests looked around, some whispering, others pretending not to notice. But Zawadi stayed still. No tears. No words. Just a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Inside, her heart burned. But she wasn't going to react. Not yet. She was holding something stronger than anger. She was holding a secret. Because while Themba had been playing games, Zawadi had been quietly planning. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was power. Let them laugh tonight. Let Aking feel bold and important. Let Themba pretend he was still in control. Zawadi knew the truth. And soon the whole room would know it too. This wasn't the night she lost everything. It was the night she took it all back. While Themba was busy sneaking around and smiling with Aking, Zawadi was doing something very different, but much smarter. She didn't scream, she didn't cry, and she didn't beg. Instead, she stayed calm and quiet, watching every little move. While Themba thought she was busy cooking dinner or planning their anniversary, Zawadi was actually meeting with lawyers in secret. She had started months ago, the moment she felt that cold distance growing between them. She didn't want to believe he was cheating, but deep down, she knew something wasn't right. So she decided to protect herself. Zawadi went through old files, hidden emails, and property papers. And that's when she found it. The house, the land, the cars, they were all under joint ownership. But there was a way to change that. With the help of a smart lawyer, she quietly began moving things into her name. Themba didn't even notice. He signed a few papers she gave him, not bothering to read. He trusted her too much. Or maybe he just didn't care anymore. Either way, that was his mistake. By the time their anniversary came around, Zawadi already had full control. She owned everything. The house they lived in. The vacation home. Even the car he drove to see other women. All of it hers. Themba thought he was the one playing the game. But the truth was, Zawadi had already won. She didn't raise her voice. She raised her power. While he was out embarrassing her in public, she was building a quiet storm behind closed doors. And now, as she sat across from him at the dinner table, watching him laugh with Aching, she wasn't angry. She was ready. Every signature he ignored, every lie he told, had led to this moment. He had no idea the ground he was standing on was no longer his. The silence wasn't pain, it was preparation. And soon, very soon, he would understand exactly what that silence had been hiding. Dessert had just been served. The table was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and soft music in the background. Themba, feeling proud and untouchable, raised his wine and smiled as if he was the king of the evening. Aching leaned into him, laughing too loudly at a joke no one else found funny. The guests, though still a bit awkward, tried to keep the mood light. But Zawadi sat there calmly, her eyes focused, her heart steady. She had waited for the perfect moment. And now it had arrived. With a gentle smile on her face, Zawadi reached into her bag and pulled out 2 plain white envelopes. She placed them carefully on the table, right next to Themba's dessert plate. Everyone paused. The laughter slowly faded. Themba looked at the envelopes, confused. "What's this?" he asked. Zawadi looked straight into his eyes and said, calmly but clearly, "This is the last sweet thing you'll ever get from me." The room went silent. Themba opened the first envelope. His smile dropped instantly. It was an eviction notice. He was being asked legally to leave the home within 48 hours. He looked up, shocked, but Zawadi simply nodded toward the second envelope. With shaky hands he opened it. A lawsuit. Zawadi was suing him for emotional distress and misuse of marital assets. She had receipts, documents, proof, everything needed to win. Aching blinked, confused. Themba stared at the papers like they were written in another language. "Is this a joke?" he whispered. But Zawadi's face showed no humor. "No," she said softly. "This is justice." The guests sat frozen, unsure of what to say or do. Zawadi stood up slowly, took one last sip of her wine, and straightened her dress. Her voice was calm, her back tall, her power clear. She had turned pain into strength, betrayal into a plan. And in that moment, everyone realized they hadn't come to a celebration. They had come to the beginning of an ending. An ending Zawadi had written herself. Themba looked at the papers in disbelief, then suddenly burst out laughing, as if the whole thing was some kind of silly prank. "You can't be serious," he chuckled, waving the eviction notice in the air. Aching leaned closer, clearly confused, whispering something in his ear. But her smile was fading fast. She could feel something was wrong, very wrong. The mood in the room had completely changed. The guests sat quietly, watching everything unfold like a movie. Zawadi didn't laugh. She stood up slowly, her voice calm but sharp. She looked directly at Themba and said, "You have 48 hours to leave my property." The room went silent again. Themba's smile dropped. He blinked, like he didn't understand what she had just said. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice low and nervous. Zawadi took a deep breath and spoke clearly, her voice steady. "The land, the house, the cars, even the watch on your wrist. It's all in my name now." You could hear a pin drop. Themba's face turned pale. He looked down at the shiny watch on his wrist, the one he always showed off proudly. Now it felt like it was burning his skin. Aching sat frozen, eyes wide, as if the air had been knocked out of her. Zawadi didn't raise her voice. She didn't gloat. She just stood there, full of grace and quiet strength. She had been underestimated for too long. But not anymore. Every document had been signed, every step legal. Themba had given it all away without even reading what he was signing. Now the consequences had arrived, wrapped in truth, sealed with power. Zawadi walked away from the table slowly, leaving behind the man who had betrayed her, and the woman who thought she could take her place. She didn't need to shout or cry. She had already won. And as she walked out of the room, heels clicking softly on the floor, she left behind more than just a dinner. She left behind her past, and stepped fully into her power. What Themba didn't know was that while he was busy showing off and embarrassing Zawadi, a tiny hidden camera had been recording everything. It had been placed carefully in the dining room, hidden in a flower arrangement right in front of the table. Zawadi had set it up days before the dinner, not for revenge, but for proof. She wanted everything captured clearly. The flirting, the disrespect, the moment she handed him the eviction notice, and every word he said. She needed backup in case he tried to deny what happened. At first, the footage was kept private, shared only with her lawyers for legal protection. But the next morning, someone leaked the video. No one knows exactly who did it. Some say it was a guest. Others say Aking sent it to a friend, not realizing the impact. But once the footage hit the internet, it exploded. The video went viral within hours. People across Kenya and Nigeria couldn't believe what they were watching. A woman standing calmly while her cheating husband laughed with another woman, only to then flip the script with quiet power and legal fire. It was like a movie but real. The hashtag dessert and divorce started trending everywhere. Comments flooded in. Women cheered for Zawadi's strength. Men argued in the replies. Memes were made of Themba's shocked face, and everyone quoted Zawadi's line. "This is the last sweet thing you'll ever get from me." Some called her a queen. Others called her a genius. Everyone had an opinion. But one thing was clear. Zawadi had become a symbol of silent strength and smart revenge. Themba, once a respected man in business circles, couldn't even go online without seeing his downfall replayed in HD. Aking disappeared from social media completely. And Zawadi? She stayed quiet. No interviews, no comments. She let the world speak for her. The video had done its job. And the whole world now knew. Zawadi didn't just walk away. She walked away with the last word, the last laugh, and all the power. 3 days after the dramatic dinner, Aking showed up at Zawadi's doorstep. She wasn't smiling this time. Her hair was messy, her eyes red from crying, and her voice shaky. Gone was the confident woman who had laughed loudly at the dinner table and toasted with Zawadi's wine. Now, she stood in front of the woman she had once tried to replace, holding her hands together like she was praying. She didn't wait for Zawadi to say anything. Words started spilling out fast. She blamed Themba. She said she didn't know he was still married. She claimed he lied to her, said the marriage was over, said Zawadi didn't care anymore. She begged for understanding. "I'm sorry," she cried. "I didn't mean to hurt you. Please forgive me." Zawadi stood silently behind the door for a moment, just looking at her. She didn't seem angry, just calm, steady, and done. She slowly opened the door wider, looked Aking straight in the eyes, and said in the most peaceful voice, "I don't argue with leftovers." There was no yelling, no insults, just that one line sharp enough to cut deep. Before Aking could say another word, Zawadi gently but firmly closed the door in her face. And this time it stayed closed for good. Aking stood there for a while, hoping maybe Zawadi would change her mind. But the door didn't open again. There was no second chance. Zawadi had already walked through fire and come out stronger. She had no space left for tears that weren't hers, or apologies that arrived too late. She had already taken back her power, her peace, and her pride. And she wasn't about to let anyone take it away again. Not even with tears. Not even with sorry. The message was clear. Zawadi wasn't just done with Themba. She was done with all the drama. No more betrayal. No more fake friends. No more begging. Only healing, strength, and silence. And from that moment forward, Aking became just a chapter Zawadi had already finished reading, closed, unread again, and left far behind. Themba was not ready to give up easily. His pride was too big. After losing the house, the cars, and even the watch on his wrist, he decided to take Zawadi to court. He walked into the courtroom with confidence, wearing a fancy suit and pretending like he was still in control. He demanded compensation. He told the judge that Zawadi had tricked him, that she had embarrassed him in public, and that he deserved something in return. He talked about his emotional pain and how he had lost everything. But the judge, an experienced woman from Mombasa, had already read through every document. She knew the full story. She had seen the viral video. She understood exactly what kind of man Themba was. As he kept talking, she flipped through the file slowly, calmly, letting him speak. When he finally finished, the courtroom went silent, waiting for her response. She looked him straight in the eyes and said, "Mr. Themba, your arrogance doesn't qualify as an asset." The room froze. Even Themba didn't know how to respond. He looked stunned. She closed the file, leaned back slightly in her chair, and said, "Case dismissed." Just like that, it was over. Zawadi sat quietly in the courtroom, dressed in a simple outfit, peaceful and strong. She didn't smile, she didn't celebrate. She just nodded respectfully and stood to leave. She had already won long before that day, not just in court, but in life. Themba, now fully defeated, watched her walk out with everything he had once taken for granted. The cars, the house, the respect, and most of all, the dignity he had tried to crush. Zawadi never looked back. Outside the courtroom, people clapped for her. Strangers sent her messages of support. The whole country had seen her story, and they saw her not as a victim, but as a woman who turned pain into power. Themba had lost the case, but more than that, he had lost the one person who once loved him the most. And no court could help him get her back. Zawadi stood alone in the quiet halls of the house she once called home. The same place where she had dreamed, cried, planned anniversary dinners, and built a life with someone she thought would love her forever. But now, every corner of that house reminded her of pain, lies, and betrayal. She didn't want to live in a memory. So she made a bold decision. She sold it. Every wall, every piece of furniture, every luxury item was turned into cash. But instead of using the money for revenge or to live a flashy new life, she chose something deeper, something that would last. Zawadi used the money to open a women's shelter. A safe place for women who, just like her, had been broken by betrayal, lies, and emotional abuse. She named it Sweet Endings. Because every woman deserves a sweet ending, no matter how bitter the beginning. The shelter was warm and peaceful. It had clean beds, warm meals, therapy sessions, and most importantly, safety. A place where women could cry, heal, and start fresh. She met women who had been through worse than her. Some had nowhere to go. Some had been silenced for years. But when they walked through the doors of Sweet Endings, they found not just shelter, but hope. Zawadi sat with them, talked to them, listened to them. She didn't come as a hero, but as someone who understood. News about the shelter spread fast. People admired her strength. Donations started coming in. Volunteers joined her mission. Zawadi had turned her heartbreak into something beautiful, something powerful. She didn't just save herself. She was helping save others too. She never looked back at the house or the pain she left behind. She had already built something far better. A home filled with courage, healing, and new beginnings. Sweet Endings wasn't just a name. It was a promise. And Zawadi kept it, one woman at a time. 1 year later, on the same date that was once filled with heartbreak, Zawadi sat at a rooftop restaurant in Paris. The Eiffel Tower sparkled in the distance, and soft music played in the background. She was alone, but not lonely. She wore a stunning gold dress that shimmered under the lights, and her smile was calm, full of peace. In front of her sat a glass of wine, a quiet meal, and a view of a city that had seen many kinds of love, lost, broken, and healed. This time there was no drama, no pretending, no pain. Just her. Just peace. Zawadi took a slow sip of her wine and looked out over the city. Her phone buzzed with messages from women at the Sweet Endings shelter, sending her love and gratitude. She had built something powerful from her pain. She had chosen healing over hatred, strength over bitterness. As she sat there, she whispered softly to herself, "Some anniversaries aren't for love. They're for liberation." She didn't need a partner beside her to feel whole. She had learned to celebrate herself. That night in Paris wasn't about the past. It was about how far she had come. From betrayal to boldness, from silence to strength, Zawadi had rewritten her story. She finished her wine, stood up, and walked into the night with confidence. Paris wasn't just a place on a map now. It was the symbol of her freedom, her power, and the sweet, quiet joy of starting over.